Okay, everybody, welcome to this WOX webinar about Coxing Bumps. It feels mad that we're already at this time of year, that we are getting ready for summer bumps racing. And let's all say thank you to the river gods that it has not been raining and we're not dealing with really high stream. So we are actually in a really good position to actually be running bumps over the next couple of weeks and the next month or so. So this is going to be something that's I hope really informative, whether you have done bumps loads of times or whether you're doing bumps the first time. And we have a wide variety of experience here to kind of share with you some of our top tips, talk about some of the things you've asked us questions about, and hopefully sort of demystify what bumps actually is and how to be an exceptional coxswain whilst you are also coxing bumps as well. So who are we? Who are WOX? WOX, the winning Cox, is a team of world-class coxswains. You can see us here. We have all known each other for a very long time. We've almost all competed against each other at some point. And a couple of years ago, Morgan, who is another WOX mentor joining me on the call, decided that enough was enough and there wasn't enough being done to help develop coxing across the UK and across our community, and we actually needed more opportunities to get together to share knowledge and to try and, as a whole collective, elevate coxing across wherever you're from, and basically really value this amazing seat that we all occupy. My name's Erin. I actually learnt to row at Pembroke College, Oxford. So I cut my teeth in coxing on the ISIS. And I kind of always say to anyone that if you can cox effectively there, you can basically cox anywhere. Morgan, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Morgan. I learnt prior to coming to Oxford in a little town called Ross-on-Wye. And then I didn't actually do any coxing when I was at Oriel, but I did rather strangely coach at Keble and did a bit of rowing actually in some of their boats. So that's been my rowing experience of bumps. Not sure that they're too thankful for my rowing abilities, but I filled that seat as good as a jam sandwich. Yeah.
And then whilst I actually very recently returned to college to help out whilst they were on high stream and jumped into Pembroke W1 in Torpids in the spring bumps for Oxford, we thought we should get some on the ground intel as well from Oxford and Cambridge. So we have Rob joining us. Do you want to say hi, Rob?
Rob can't unmute. Hang on.
Oh no. Okay. Well, Rob, while Rob unmutes, interrupt me, Rob. When we were saying we need to get someone who, has
There we
done a
go.
lot of bumps recently, I thought there was no one better. I know that have done more bumps racing than Rob.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, so I've been at Pembroke for almost 7 years now, done way too many bump starts. Um, yeah, so happy to give some tips.
Rob, how many did you do in Torpids? How many boats did you do in the end?
So it's 6 boats and it was 17 races, 18 if you count sandwich boat. So
We count the sandwich boat. Yeah, that's
yeah.
good. And then we also have Claire joining us from Cambridge as well, because we were aware we're a little bit dark blue heavy. And obviously there's Cambridge bumps coming up as well. So we've got Claire joining us from Cambridge.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Claire. Can't quite live up to that bumps expertise experience, but I did learn to row at Cambridge at St. Catherine's College. And yeah, been I guess less than the coxing side. I've been a rower, a little bit too tall for the coxing seat. So yeah, I've rowed in quite a few bumps now. And yeah, very happy to give that sort of perspective from a rower side as well.
Yeah, so we've kind of tried to absorb a lot of the questions that you guys had before you came along. So we will make sure that we, hopefully by the end of this, will have covered the majority. But if you do have any questions as we go, please do drop them in the chat. Morgan's going to be keeping an eye on them, and we'll make sure that if we haven't covered them towards the end, we will make sure we get them covered. So we've got Rob and Claire, and then me and Morgan. So feel free to ask any questions. So first things first, just to set the tone of what we're going to be talking about. We are not going to sit here and go through all of the different rules for Cambridge bumps, Oxford bumps. Obviously, this is going to go on YouTube as well. So we're not just going to be talking about summer rates and May bumps. We're also going to be kind of a lot of the things we're saying will be relevant for torpids and for length bumps as well. And there are other bumps races that go on around the country. I know we're kind of talking quite Oxford and Cambridge specific, but there will be other bumps races going on. We couldn't possibly comprehensively cover all of those rules. It is a very unique thing to the river that you are on and the event that you're competing in. I know personally from Oxford, some of the rules that exist in torpids are a little bit different as they are in eights. So please take it as a given. This is not us telling you what the rules are, especially if you're in Oxford and Cambridge. You will have briefings ahead of the event, which will give you all of that information, the kind of practical, logistical, safety rules. We're obviously going to be talking about some of those bits and bobs, but basically, you need to make sure you know the rules. And this is something that I would say to any coxswain going to any regatta anywhere, is actually knowing the rules of the race that you're about to compete in is really, really important. And it's a huge part of the preparation that essentially you need to make as a coxswain, as much as, you know, the rowers are doing their training and making sure their recovery is good and they're having pasta the night before and all those sorts of things. What you guys should be doing is making sure you're really familiar with where you need to be and what you need to be doing. The rules are generally there to keep you safe, to keep the regattas running really smoothly, and to make sure everything's functioning. So some of the key things, which, and it's not limited to this, but is making sure that you're really clear on the warm-up, exactly what time you can get on the water. Normally it's kind of after a certain kind of safety launch has passed you. When can you be on the water? If you have a limited amount of time warming up, then making sure that you give time to that on land. Being really clear on what the start procedure is. It seems to be very similar across Oxford and Cambridge that they favour a small cannon to start the racing. So making sure when those guns are going off and kind of what that actually means, making sure that you don't go too quickly and you're going on the actual gun that you need to go on, and making sure you understand exactly what that start procedure is. Obviously, in bumps, you were also kind of holding onto bung lines, which is something that's completely different as well. And that will be talked about in your coxing briefings. There's the racing themselves and what bumps actually look like. We're going to go into what making a bump or conceding a bump or being bumped might look like. But again, different rules about essentially clearing lines and where you should be going, what the expectation is, and if you keep racing, if you get bumped or if you don't. And then lastly, there's also thinking about getting home again, because you have the race itself, but what's the circulation for getting home safely, essentially, because if there's a division after you, then you're going to be potentially sharing the water with crews about to race, as well as you need to getting home. So all of those things, like I say it one more time, make sure you read the rules. It's really, really important, and it will help you feel really confident as you go into essentially the fun bit, which is actually doing the racing. So there is a little myth around bumps, and I have to say I've fallen foul of it before. But actually, being a more experienced coxswain, I actually learnt to row, as I said, at Pembroke back in 2011. And I did 3 bumps races. I've actually been back a couple of times to basically stand in as an experienced cox, most recently a couple of months ago. There's this kind of bumps myth that essentially, in order for a bump to be kind of valid or successful or whatever, that you basically have to smash into another crew. We have also seen the kind of YouTube viral videos or going around on Instagram or whatever with people kind of dramatic big crashes. But what actually, if a bumps race runs effectively and smoothly and properly, and the coxes are doing their job as best they can in terms of steering and safety, the marshals, the umpires, and everything are operating really effectively, if you are the faster crew, you will likely get the bump. And I'm saying likely because there are so many different variables that are going on. But generally speaking, in Oxford at least, there's a length and a half between 2 crews. If you are over a length and a half faster over the distance of the course, you are very likely to get that bump. Therefore, going a little bit wild and swiping and doing kind of mad aiming for smashing sort of boats up, that is not going to basically be conducive for you and your crew, but also the race going on around you and the whole bumps, like overall. This myth essentially can be busted by the fact that, like, if everyone actually competes sort of properly And I mean that in a following the rules and basically competing to try and be the faster crew, faster than the one behind you and faster than the one in front of you. There doesn't actually necessarily need to be contact between those. If you're conceding safely and you're basically following the rules, there doesn't actually need to be big contact. And that's actually something that you'll see if you are watching racing and you watch maybe those higher divisions where it's more about the speed of the boats that are racing rather than the competency of the coxswains or the competency of the crew as well. If they're not basically, I've been in crews where they're not particularly rowing even pressure on either side. There might be a crab or two, there might be things going on, and that makes it a lot harder for us to do our jobs. But ultimately, it's about trying to be the faster crew and therefore being faster than the crew behind you and catching up to that boat in front of you. So I'm going to ask Morgan to jump in with me on this one. I just want to talk a little bit about the kind of big picture and fundamentals to remember. I know that many of you may never have coxed outside of the piece of water that you end up kind of doing bumps on. That was absolutely the case for me, and bumps was the only regatta that I'd ever kind of participated in. But there are actually some really big things that we can learn from if we kind of zoom out of bumps racing as a format and have a look at actually some of the other kind of events that you might end up racing at. I know I did see quite a few college crews came down to Head of the River. You might be thinking about Henley Women's, trying to qualify for Henley Royal this year. Any other regattas as well. A lot of these are actually really relevant to bumps. And sometimes we can get in the bumps bubble and forget that actually there are some kind of very big picture and we can kind of maybe apply them to bumps. And so when I was talking to Morgan about what does she think kind of the big takeaways that she kind of had as a coach and having observed bumps, she came up with this one on the top left. So maybe Morgan, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I think it's really easy to get drawn into the idea that bumps is this really short, sharp sprint and it's like a tension go and it's over within 20 strokes. And there will be strategies within the colleges to try and get the job done that early. But often that doesn't happen. And then what happens is you've gone absolutely all out for 20 strokes, you've wrecked yourself, then you realise you've got to keep going. Your rowers have got nothing in the tank. And then you go way slower later on in the track. Whereas I think it's really important that ultimately, if you're putting the boat in the fastest water so that your crew can go the fastest it can possibly go, if you are starting how you'll start in any race, and then you are hitting a transition of sorts, you're going to end up in the best position with the highest hull speed to do what you're looking to do. If you're trying to chop and change, physiologically, we can't do it well enough. It's just not possible. You're either going to have a maximum effort, short 15 to 20 strokes in you, and then you're done. And that's probably cost you the race and you might end up getting bumped yourself. Or you can kind of play it more tactically and actually go out hard, get yourself into rhythm. And if you're thinking about we're starting 1.5 lengths between you and the next crew, then you're trying to close the distance through their wash. If you haven't found a rhythm and you get into that turbulent water, it's going to be so difficult to close that gap. So rather than putting yourself on the back foot, if everything you've done is about racing your race and getting into your rhythm and finding your length, when you come to that little bit of swell, that little bit of chop, you're going to really crunch into that distance. So kind of having that bigger picture in your head and being able to both use the energy of the part of the race that you're on, but also have the clarity in your plan. Remember that we've got to change energy systems. Remember, we need to be rowing long strokes. It's going to give you your best and biggest opportunity. And also as a cox, it's going to allow you to get more out of the crew. And that's going to be so important.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that kind of leads on a little bit to the next piece, which is just the closer you get to another crew, the more challenging it's going to get for them and for you with steering as well. So I put here stay technical. And what I mean by that is focus on the rowing and the rhythm rather than going nuts and telling them to work harder to try and desperately sort of make that bump or have that cox concede in front of you. We had quite a lot of questions about pushes and things like that, and we're going to sort of talk about them with Rob and Claire in a minute. But actually, it's going to get a lot more challenging for the rowers to essentially complete their strokes and to essentially keep the speed of the boat going the closer you get to the bump, which is why for those of you who've raced bumps before, that last bit before you actually make a bump can be quite agonizing. We've been really close before. I know Rob with the men, it was super close and you were so close to making a bump and then it didn't quite happen because actually it just becomes really fatiguing and terrible water for the crews to race in. So remember that the closer you get to a bump, actually, the even more important it is to basically do what you had been doing before, because that's got you to that point where you're almost making a bump. There's kind of two here that are just really, really key, which are sort of around steering and planning ahead. So if we talk about steering first, we're going to talk about steering on actually the next slide, but steering safely is one of the most important things that you can actually do. And when I mean safely, I mean essentially steering should be your biggest priority, in my opinion. I was once asked, would you rather the Cox box break or the steering wire? And I was like, what a silly question. I'd throw the Cox box into the water before I'd give up that steering. The steering is so important. And obviously, in Oxford, you've got the gut to negotiate. And then you've also got the crossover. And in Cambridge, you've got a number of quite challenging bends, which you've got to contend with. And steering, and as Morgan said, putting your crew in the best piece of water that you possibly can will add to boat speed. And that will add to boat speed a lot more than you kind of maybe getting a bit distracted in what you're saying and ending up kind of speaking to crews. And also, if you are a little bit further down in those divisions, hopefully the crews in front of you will have cleared safely. But even if they've cleared safely, it's not the biggest patch of water that you're going to be competing in. So making sure that you are aware of what other crews are doing and what's going on, not just in the boat in front of you, but the boat in front of that as well. And that comes down again here to planning ahead. The biggest mistake I think bumps coxswains can make is making decisions at the last minute. So I was talking about that preparation around rules and knowing where you need to be and what you need to do. To some extent, you can plan ahead in bumps. You can actually have a real think about, okay, what's going on in front of me? What will I do if this crew bumps this crew in front of me and we've got now a long race in front of us? What will I do if someone doesn't clear properly and they're in their way? How can I basically move around them? And the big thing, again, coming back to that steering safely is, okay, you can see there's maybe a bit of carnage happening in front of you. How can I safely get my crew around that in order to prioritize my race and my crew? So avoiding those last minute decisions is going to be really, really important. And that comes down to steering, but also when you're thinking about conceding as well. Holding on and kind of trying to hold off and do the latest concession possible, which then may well end up in too much contact. It can end up with damaging boats, and the worst thing that would be happen if it's anyone got hurt. So it's avoiding making those last minute decisions, because actually we're talking about a multi-day regatta. You want to make sure that you are in the best place possible in order to be competing the next day as well. And then lastly on here, something that is very much a WOX mentality is that there can actually be really good cooperation between coxes, and we can kind of lead the way on that. That doesn't mean you aren't being competitive and you don't want to go and beat that crew and make those bumps. But actually on the water cooperation, particularly in and around warming up, getting on the start line and then getting home again, will actually be really, really important and really help you get the best out of your crew, because you'll get the best warm up. You'll be able to kind of communicate with each other and also communicate with the marshals who are on the side. If you have a question, if you need to ask anything, if you've heard they might be running late, feel free just to ask them a question. They should know. And if they don't, they've probably got a radio and they can find out. I always want to be kind of considered as kind of a cox on the water that, is got my crew's back and I'm looking out for them. But I also want to be kind of seen as a good egg. You know, I don't want to be cutting people up and making life difficult for anyone else. I want the racing to do the talking. And then lastly, the just coming to the bottom, like in terms of kind of pushing those boundaries and being dangerous, actually a safe and well executed race is far, far more enjoyable. I've been there before a lot early in my career. I remember a really, really late concession I made, and I ended up with a blade in the back, and it was really unpleasant. And actually, it was far more unpleasant and sad than it was actually getting bumped. It's disappointing when you get bumped, but actually, you know, causing a klaxon or anything like that, that was far less enjoyable. So just make sure that kind of you keep thinking about that big picture when it comes to bumps. Morgan, this is your favorite, talking about steering and maneuvering. Do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, just have a think about, you know, the patch of water that you're going to be trying to navigate or maneuver on. Think about the crews that you've got around you. How much space is there? Like, it's pretty tight out there. Being able to talk to the crews around you, either asking them if they're going to turn or telling them you're going to turn, helping each other. Do you need some room? Where can I go? Those sort of things make a big difference. And then thinking about how you're actually going to do that turn. So in the wider parts, you can draw a rectangle. So you row down one side, stop, turn fully, row to the other, turn, carry on. On the narrow parts, you're going to need to literally tap turn where you are, because your stern and your bow are going to be, you know, teetering on the edges of the riverbank. So know and understand where these areas are, know and understand and have practiced how you're going to get around these sections of the track. It's going to make your life on race day so much easier. The last thing you want to do is either be coming in to the finish line or just trying to turn to get into your marshalling position at the start line, and there's a collision, or you get your bow stuck in the bank and you snap the bow ball off, or something like that happens. You know, these little things, often the most stressful time as a coxswain is getting yourself to the start or getting yourself back in after the finish. So practice is going to make permanent. Have a plan, have some structure on how you're going to do it, and make sure that everyone else in your boat also knows how you're going to do that, even if you've got a sub in.
Yeah, I completely agree. When I jumped in to do bumps a couple of months ago, I was so nervous about the logistics, about essentially getting them warmed up in the right way, but actually sort of getting ourselves onto the bung line, because it is an odd thing to do. You know, you're basically turning. Sometimes you're essentially turning in the way that the athletes aren't actually not always used to be turning in. And then you've got boats which are very close together, much closer than it normally would be when spinning. And so actually just making sure that they're really switched on and you're really switched on at that point is key. And just coming back to that steering and communicating, this is particularly during the warm up. You know, if you need more room, ask, speak to someone, say, can I just do this? We were operating in half divisions a couple of weeks ago, and even then I was like, we're just about to do a burst, can you just give us a bit of space? And just making sure you're not in front of people. If you're about to do a turn, again, communicate with the coxswains around you. If you essentially need to turn and get onto your bung line, but someone's waiting to go past, rather than block up the river and cause a bit of a log jam, make sure they can get down, because if they're late to the start, the whole race is going to be delayed. It'll impact you guys as well. If you're going to be stopping soon, make sure people know that you're going to be stopping. It sounds really, really basic, but people cannot read your mind. And actually, if you are, you know, kind of stressing out the athletes before you get on the start line, that's going to ebb into how you're feeling as well. And it's going to make you feel tense. You want to get to the start line as relaxed as possible, just like you want your athletes to be. And acknowledging that the warm up on the water will be super limited. So a good part of this preparation, we were talking about understanding the rules. Also, plan your warm up on land. Make sure that they are really warm. So if the racing is delayed, but they're trying to make up time and they move things a little bit quicker, make sure that you're warm beforehand. So if you end up, all you can do is paddle down to the start and get on the start, that you're confident that you're going to be in a position to basically put a race together. Just coming round to steering, again, I'm aware we do have quite a few people, this is their first bumps racing. And so this might seem a little bit obvious to some of the people who have done bumps before. But it's all about essentially making sure that the hull and the boat is, as often as possible, is parallel to the bank. whether you are essentially racing on the opposite side to normal or not, it's always being aware of the bank that's there and how you are placing your boat in terms of where the bank is. If you are having to go around something, we've put a very lovely log here to demonstrate some low-hanging trees and branches and all those sorts of things we know are going to be in your way, because in the grand scheme of things, you know, the bank isn't straight. There are bushes, there are moored boats, there are all those sorts of things. Is making sure that if you have to make an adjustment, you make the adjustment, but then you correct yourself and you make sure you are back steering parallel to the bank. It's one of those things that I think when I see coxers who are new, they spend a lot of their time looking down at the screen, looking down at the rate. My big thing in coxing, especially bumps where, you know, there's a lot going on, is actually making sure you bring that eye line up. You sit up, you have a look around, and you know what's going on. And this is particularly obviously important during racing as well, is making sure you're putting your hull in the best piece of water to try and get the best out of the speed of the boat, but also making sure that you are aware of things that are hanging around in the water. When the water was really high, coming out of the gut for the Oxford rowers, there was a low-hanging tree, which normally you pass easily underneath it. But because the water was so high, it was something we all had to be really aware of, because actually it was so low to the water and relative to the water line, you could definitely clatter blades on it. So it's making sure that you are really switched on, even if you are super familiar with where you are, in order to keep that hull as parallel to the bank as possible. Because also, when you're racing against a stream, it's making sure that as well, you are not putting the stream in an awkward position against the hull. The fastest way is pointing directly into it. This couldn't be any bigger if it tried. And I say this from personal experience, is use power steering if you need it. When you have a race where you've got bends and turns, power steering can be your friend. What's really important in power steering is that you are really, really clear in the way that you communicate with the athletes about what you want from them. And it's also, if you're using power steering, not just having one side hard, but the other side lightening off if you want that too. So you can actually help you just get around that turn quicker. I'm going to show you a couple of clips of some recordings from us taking Headship a couple of weeks ago. I'm not going to be showing you the whole thing today, just so we don't have to sit and listen to the whole thing, but I will upload the whole thing onto YouTube in the next week, so that actually then you can listen to how I use power steering as we come out of the gut, which is one of the big bends well, the only really big bend on the Oxford course, and you can hear how I use power steering. I didn't think I'd need to use power steering because I had done races before where I didn't need it on that piece of water. And you will hear from my voice that I really needed it because the rudder just wasn't responding because the stream was running so hard. So I was very clear with my athletes because I was really not sure if I was going to entirely make the turn until we started using that power steering. And again, that just comes back to that think ahead. So in Cambridge, when you've got a couple of bends to negotiate, thinking ahead about, okay, where do I want my boat to be in order for me to take that turn? Remember, I think one of the things that no one ever really talks about when we're learning to steer in an 8 is obviously you've got to be thinking not just where your bow is, which is, you know, good 18 meters away from you. You've got to be thinking, okay, where does it need to be in 50 meters time? Because actually, if you're only thinking about it 20 meters in advance, it's probably too late because the rudder is just behind you. So it's making sure that we're being really proactive with steering. We're being really safe. We're making sure we're getting around obstacles or other boats or anything out in the water. Is think ahead as something we can't kind of reiterate enough. And that will build confidence as you go through the racing as well. Now, you've heard a lot from me. I am going to make sure Rob and Claire are unmuted as well. And we basically going to run through some sort of top tips of essentially who can, we had a lot of different questions about different things. And so we thought we'd open this up as a bit more of a panel and we can have just a little bit of discussion about some of the things you guys were asking us and what you'd like to know about essentially negotiating bumps. And so the very first one is talking about first timers. Now, I'm just going to exit my full screen here. And I'm just going to stop sharing for a second because I think it's actually much nicer if we can see everyone's faces for this bit. So if we can open it up to the floor, if you are basically Coxing Bumps first time, what can you be doing right now to sort of prepare and get yourselves ready for kind of that first regatta?
So my biggest tip would be if you're coxing for the first time and it's not in a bottom division, so like divisions 5 or above, I would cycle to Donnybridge and watch a start. Um, for me, when I did my first bumps race, the thing I was most nervous about was actually just getting attached to the start because it's unlike any other race ever. And so just watching other crews do it and seeing how they spin on and hold on to the rope and how the guns go off, it settled a lot of my nerves. So that would be my biggest tip, actually.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, from the rower perspective, like you, like when you know it's a cox's first time, obviously, usually the rowers are new to it if it's sort of in that situation as well. And I think the biggest thing is like your cox being honest with you. That's like for me a huge confidence builder, is if they're like, oh, I'm not quite sure how we attach at the start, or when we push off, is there one cannon that I think Cambridge has like a cannon minute to go and a cannon for the go and things like that. So I think hearing the cox be like asking questions to the coach, being like, can we try it out in training so that I know if the bow's gonna, if bow seat's a little bit stronger and they're going to swing the bow around and things like that. That builds so much confidence in a crew. So that once it comes to like race day, it's not like this is the first time. It's like we've practiced this, we know what we're going to do. And I think for me that was a huge thing, even if the cox is a little bit more inexperienced.
Yeah, that's a great shout. What about you, Morgan? If you got like you're coaching a cox who's going first time.
I do honestly think just coming down to some of the earlier races and watching is like the best thing you can do. I think when you watch YouTube, you sort of psych yourself out a little bit because it's like it's like the maddest of the mad that gets uploaded, right? So it's more like going down, maybe seeing just like the vibes and the energy of the area. And I also think people who are so worthwhile talking to are whoever's going to be your pole person. So whoever is like holding you at the start line literally has a pole that's like keeping you where you are. Like they have been doing that for donkey's years. They have seen it all. They have heard it all. They know the dramas. They know everything that goes on. Like they're the people I would talk to and get the knowledge from.
That's a great point. So for people who might be going, what is the poll? I don't understand. Essentially, at the start, there will be essentially someone who poleman. I don't know if there are any women. I haven't seen any women doing it. I hope they are. Who poll people, who essentially have a really big sort of long stick with like a little hook on it, who will help you once you have basically turned and you are parallel to the bank, you're pointing in the direction of racing. They will give you something to hold, which is normally basically like a manky wooden disc on a rope, which is essentially what the coxswain is going to be kind of holding semi behind them. And they will use a pole to basically push the boat and help it be in the right position. So they will most likely lead in asking your bow pair maybe to tap it on and to basically kind of keep the rope taut enough that we're not giving away half a length to the boat behind us. But also, as Morgan said, they are like super experienced. They've done this loads of times before. And depending on the stream and all those sorts of things, we had in our warm up a massive boat stopping crab before we got on to the first day of Torpids. And I was like, let's just push the bows out a little bit more because of where the side the crab was on stroke side. If not even a boat stopper, but if someone clipped the blade, I knew it would be straight into the wall. So that was again something I could ask for them for going, okay, that person might be a bit nervous. So even if they don't have a problem, they might hold back at the start because they don't want to make that mistake again. So let's just point the bows out. So yeah, I think chatting to the poleman is a great shout.
It's also good as well because the chances are they're going to be like your college's boat person or boatman. So if something does break or you need help fixing something at the start, like they have been fixing all those boats for years. Like if you do collide, they're the ones coming out with that poly filler to get you a quick job before the next day, you know?
Yeah, totally. Does anyone remember their first time at bumps? What was yours for, Rob?
So I was at Headship actually. So that was the Torpid's Headship I lost, you got back, Erin. So yeah, I remember that, and it was really stressful. But honestly, after the first race, and once I went down and watched the start of some of the lower divisions, I just felt so much better. Just the biggest questions I had were about spinning onto the bung line, because it's something you can't practice in training at all. If you can practice the rest of your bump sort of plans, your starts in training, that will really help you feel more confident on the actual day. But I really recommend just going down and watching some of it beforehand if you can.
Yeah. Also, just to be full disclaimer, this is the first headship I've ever won. I've actually lost three beforehand. I actually think I probably hold the record potentially across Oxford and Cambridge. I'd love to hear a Cox to DM me if they've lost more headships than I have. So this was like 14 years in the making, so it doesn't feel like I was sort of glory hunting. At all. Okay, so next question was around sort of racing calls. Obviously, this actually isn't super bump specific. Claire, like what do you like to kind of hear in racing? What's useful for you?
So I think I was having a think about this, and one of the big things that I found on the cam, especially, is like you say, there are quite a few corners, and the best coxes I've had are the ones who, get you onto a rhythm, get you confident in what you're doing, and then call a really good reset as you're coming out of these corners. Often it's like so chaotic at bumps. You're rowing in dirty water, you're got crews chasing you, there's whistles going on, there's so much going on. And things like corners can just immediately disrupt the boat and you lose that rhythm that you've worked hard to get. So having coxes that have a really confident reset, they know their tech focus that's worked well in training, that brings everyone back has been like transformative. And I think the boats that handle those sort of situations the best are the ones that can sort of hold on to speed. Are the ones that do really well in bumps. It's not just about, like you say, just steering into each other. It's if you can keep hold of that speed around the corners, you really got an advantage on the other crew. So that's one of the key things I think I really noticed on the cam, especially. But yeah, in the chaos of bumps, that's one of the big things for me.
Yeah. I think as well it is really important to note like that it is chaotic. There's a lot going on. I think the whistles is also something to acknowledge. So your coach who is cycling alongside will likely be using a whistle to communicate with you as to how far away you are from essentially the crew in front of you. This is very crew specific. So I would encourage you to talk to your coach if they do use a whistle and sort of what does that mean. If you are in the middle of a division, I'm going to be completely honest. I've been in the center of a division. I'm like, all whistles sound the same. So it's kind of hard to know what's my whistle. So sometimes I think they're partly there for coaches to feel like they're really adding value during whistling. But it can be really useful. Just if you're kind of, it's another thing, but it's worth knowing that it's going to be loud from the bank, but also, yeah, there are whistles going on as well. So I forgot about the whistles, but yeah, that's a good point. Rob, what do you think about when you're like making a race plan?
Well, I like to have sort of a couple race plans for different scenarios. So I usually spend a bit of time sort of actually on my own before I jump in the boat. Often when, especially if I'm coxing more experienced boat, like the guys sometimes I feel could sort of run the land warm up themselves. And that can be a time for me to sort of think and go through my race plans. So, for example, what might happen if the crew behind me gets quite close? At what point would I call a push? Would it depend on where we are on the course? If the crew is quite close behind me and we haven't really left the start area, I'm probably less likely to call a massive push because realistically, we're quite likely to get bumped. However, if we're towards the end, it's worth using that energy and not saving it for tomorrow because it might be that they've used up all their energy to get to this point. So I think just having a lot of possible scenarios in your head means that whatever happens, you'll be prepared for.
Yeah. We actually have a junior rowing news article coming out that I wrote this month about sort of scenario planning. And that might be quite a good place to kind of have a little read and have a think about, okay, it's almost like in those teen magazines you used to have those like, what if you did this, and it had all those like little like spiders and then it'd be like, you're an Aries, but this is more about bumps. Like maybe make a little one of them if you're like a visual learner. Think about, okay, what will we do if this, what do we do if that? And also it's really important in those races as well, where if you get bumped and you keep racing, is how do you kind of reset and think about that. So if we think about kind of those race calls, for me, I just try and have a bank of what is working in training. You know, you don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to racing. But what I would say is it comes down to creating racing calls that reflect the positive stuff you've been doing in training and the things that are making an impact, and just essentially shaving them down so it's not a full sentence, but you can say, you know, let's get on the legs. Very easy thing to say, but what does that actually mean? You know, does that mean you're finishing the leg drive, or does that mean you want them on the legs earlier? So just making sure that whatever those sort of snippet calls you're making in race calls are something that actually makes sense to everyone that's hearing them. Anything to add there on Morgan on racing calls?
Oh, I think just like remember your role is to be really informative. The rowers are going to want information of where they are. Giving them that is really important. That the whole role of the coach on the bank is trying to provide an informative element, whether you can actually hear them or not. And I think for me, from a coaching perspective, I always boated the crew with absolute confidence that I knew the Cox would go out and just do everything they needed to do. They could. It didn't matter if I was on the bank or not. They were going to take care of everything. And all those things are process driven. So I think remember that this is supposed to be a really fun event, and it's happening at a time of year where probably a lot of people around you, it's yourself included, might be sitting exams, or you might have vivas or whatever going on. There's a lot of stresses, and if you become outcome focused, it's really difficult to actually, even just get through the day. Whereas in the same way with your schoolwork, in rowing, in coxing, it's all process driven, and they're really basic fundamental things, and that's going to allow you to get through whatever it throws at you. And just to give like a real kind of hyped up example of this, my first year coaching Keble for bumps at summer eights, I was like waiting on the opposite side of the river, and I was like, where are they? They're going to be late. And they turned up, in a different boat, rigged a different way. And I was like, what on earth has happened? In the time that I had boated them and got to the start line, something had gone on. And the Cox just looked at me and he was like, yeah, we're all good. We're all good. And then we had a new stroke seat. Everyone was sat in different seats. They just cracked on. We got the bump. When we landed, I was like, right, what had gone on? And someone had crashed into them, written their boat off. So they just got into the women's 2v8 and rode that up to the start line and just cracked on with it. So there is a process. The process was our boat's broken, land that one, get in this one. We can sit in different seats. We'll be fine. Everything stays the same. We know our race plan. Off we go. Job done. So, really, really drive those processes.
I love that. That's great. Okay, so thinking about bumping and getting bumped, a lot of questions were sort of on how do I, what should I be focusing on? What's, how do I motivate them if we've got a crew right behind us, and thinking about the crew in front? And I mean, it sounds like a cop-out answer, but my original answer would be it's very kind of scenario based, and it depends sort of what the process is at the time and what's going on. But I mean, my feeling on it would be always trying to think about it's a lot. I tell you what, it's a lot easier to motivate a crew to push on towards the crew in front than it is to run away from the crew behind you. So thinking about what technical things that you can do to try and maximize the boat speed, to hold on that little bit longer, to row a little bit better, to, drop a split or two, is definitely always going to be a lot easier. But it is one of the big challenges of bumps, that there's threats from behind and there's opportunity in front of you. Rob, any thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely feel like the crew seeing a fast boat approaching them is probably a better motivator for them than pretty much anything you can say. But what you can say is something that makes them all do the same thing together. So to some extent, I don't think it really matters whether it's a focus on the finishes or a focus on the legs, as long as they're all responding to that threat in the same way. A second thing is for the Cox, if you're about to bump the crew in front, just take a look behind you and make sure you're not about to be bumped yourself. Because there are times when you can sort of be so focused on catching the crew in front that you just temporarily slip out of that sort of wider view, and you could end up in a pretty sticky situation trying to clear with the crew right on top of you. So just taking a look behind you, even when you think you're about to bump, is a good idea.
Yeah, and that's also, yeah, like you say, with clearing and stuff. And I also think as we said, it takes longer than you think to bump that crew. And so if you need to be doing something about the crew and behind you, that's also really key. Also, I mean, Claire, you could probably vouch for this because I've actually never rode bumps, but it's the crews feel a lot closer than maybe they actually are.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I think it was my first day of my first ever bumps. I ended up in a very close call. We were like on three whistles, very close, basically, to the crew in front of us, and the crew behind us was also equally close. And I think when you're sat in the boat as a rower, and I was sort of near the stern, like all you can see is this boat coming towards you, like closer and closer, and you're like, oh my gosh. And it's so easy to get in your own head and be like, well, if I just push my max watts for the next two strokes, it'll be fine. And I think, as you've both said, and Rob sort of emphasized, like being able to bring a crew back together and really focus on like we're, you know, we've got overlap, or like we're one seat or we're half a length away, whatever, from the crew in front, or we're moving, and really updating the rowers and saying, okay, we're going to make this next step by doing this together in one go, like makes a huge difference when you see this crew coming towards you seemingly closer and closer, and it does feel like they're sort of on top of you even when they might not be. So I think I completely agree, like being really informative to the rowers and bringing it back to one key focus is so useful in that situation, and knowing when to go for the push, because as you say, it takes longer than you think to catch the crew in front, and usually by that point your body's in panic mode anyway, and you're seeing a boat come to you, so you're in even more panic mode. So being pretty confident that if you're going to go for this sort of burst and you're going to really move, that's going to be it, because otherwise if you've got a crew right behind you and your rowers burn out, it's a really tough situation to be in, and especially with clearing if everyone's completely away with the ferries after giving it their all. So um, yeah, certainly something to be aware of.
Yeah. I think as well, uh it's thinking about when you're kind of at that point when you're going through a turn. So Claire, you were saying obviously like on the cam there's turns, and the big one is the gut, is that can also create margins. So it can feel again like the crew's moving away from you in front of you and the crew behind you's catching up and vice versa. So if you are in a tighter situation, that again is coming back to that thinking ahead of okay, where you are, where are you, and if you are very close to getting bumped, and you're coming up to a bend, you know that rudder's going to slow you down. Is it better right now to kind of safely concede, and then in order to continue racing, because you're going to kind of cause an incident, and then you continue racing because you might be able to catch that crew in front, and then you might be in a much more positive situation. But yeah, I do remember, coxing and then seeing the panic in my stroke girl's eyes as it felt like as we hit the gut, they just like shot towards us, and I was like, it's okay, away too. They're gonna hit that stream in a minute. So just remembering that is a variable as well that you'll be dealing with, whether you're chasing or being chased. I think that is key. So we've kind of mentioned it already, but kind of thoughts on pushes and things like that. We had a lot of questions on pushes and when they're needed, and if they're needed.
I think by and large in the lower divisions, if you haven't done bumps before, which is probably where you'll be starting if you haven't, they're not really needed very much because the speed differentials between the boats tend to be a lot bigger there. And if you're gaining on somebody pretty quickly, I would just, instead of thinking about pushing and making sure you get that bump, especially if you're in the first half of the race, just think about getting yourself into a position where you can clear nicely and easily. That's a much more effective use of sort of your brain power in that moment. In the higher up divisions, I think pushes can really work, but you all eight people, I think, need to know that all eight rowers need to know that it's coming. And I think this again goes back to what you were saying about scenarios. I think if you have a scenario which is, or we're this close at this point in the race, we'll do a push. If that's all laid out beforehand, I think it can really work, but sort of only there.
Yeah, agreed. Claire, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Like, even in the high divisions, I've had pushes go not so well, and it's always been because all eight rowers are doing their own thing and think they can carry the eight on their own. So as Rob said, I think having a really clear plan, practicing it in training, you might be able to do some sparring and things like that. That's super, super useful because you sort of go through all the theoreticals and all the rowers like, yes, 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 we'll do these pushes. And, oh, I agree, it's a great idea. And then you try it out and lo and behold, all the rowers forget that they have to listen to someone and try and do their own thing. So I think, yeah, like you say, make a plan, but then also practice the plan and make sure everyone in the boat understands what that means when the pressure's really on, so that when it's all happening in the chaos, you can really dial in and it doesn't feel like a new experience you've got to try out.
Yeah. And I think as well as remembering if a push doesn't have the desired outcome, what the impact that may be on the other side. So there's the physiological, they're knackered and it didn't work, but there's also like, oh, it didn't work. And like the head's down. And that can be tough as well. So making sure that if you are committing to that you kind of you're willing to gamble with what the other side of the push might look like as well, which is useful. And then the last thing for people who aren't super familiar with bumps might be really confused why we keep talking about sandwiches, but like a sandwich boat and what that actually is. So essentially, you have divisions, and in order for you to kind of progress up a division, or for the bottom person, if they get bumped to move down a division, you have what's called a sandwich boat. And the sandwich boat is essentially the top boat of the division below and then the bottom boat of the division above. So what that means is if you end up as a sandwich boat, you will race twice. It's relatively quite a quick turnaround. So from a prep and planning perspective, that's something that's really important, from the rowers and supporting them, making sure they are getting kind of a drink and a snack or some refueling or whatever they need to do. And there's the logistics of that quick turnaround. If it's pouring it down with rain, hopefully it's not. Do they need a dry piece of kit? Thinking about all those sorts of things and kind of being their brains for them and making them start to think about that. But then there's also the practicality of obviously racing that themselves. So there is likely the need, if you are that sandwich boat and you're the top of that division, to row over, which means obviously you complete a full run of the track without any bumps behind. So that requires a reasonable amount of exertion from the athletes, and then they've got to go and do it again, but this time with no one chasing them, so the pressure off, but with that intent to bump above. I've actually never raced a sandwich boat in all my time, so I actually can't give my top tips, to be honest with you. But does anyone else have anything kind of other than the practical things, like a good way to kind of approach being a sandwich boat?
Yeah, so I just would say that it's actually something that's not just for sandwich boats, but I see a lot of crews, especially in eights, when the crews in front have bumped out and also the crew behind you is bumped out. And the likelihood of being bumped or bumping is very, very small in the second half of the race. I'll see them go past the island at complete full pressure, doing everything they can, going at rate 35. And sometimes the best course of action is to take the rate down and to paddle to the finish line. Not completely as in training, but a sort of halfway house can be really useful for saving energy, especially if you're a sandwich boat and have to race an hour later, or even just for the next day.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, that's great. It's yeah, just basically being aware of actually what's the best thing for the crew in the scenario that you're in at the time. Yeah, totally. I don't think, Morgan, have we had any particular questions that popped up on the chat?
No questions have popped in.
Okay.
You can send messages directly to the host if you do want to send something.
Yeah. Okay. So if you have anything that we haven't actually directly covered, then please do ask. But I think that pretty much covers a lot of the questions that we had kind of in advance. I'm aware we're coming towards the hour, so we're not going to push it much further. But hopefully this will be really useful. What's next is that we're just going to show the first 90 seconds of the Torpids headship race that I did recently. My big thing when I came in really, really last minute. So I had to kind of really level up on a lot of these things. I was, full disclosure, really nervous because headship was on the cards for the women and they trained really, really hard. And I was really nervous about all the things we've said as a first time you'd be nervous on. I was really nervous about getting on a bung line and having a good start and making sure I got them onto rhythm and all those sorts of things. And my big thing was about being really calm and really relaxed. I knew that we had a fast crew. We just needed to get out and get into our rhythm. And I didn't want them to think that they needed to do anything different that they usually did in training in order to bump, because I was pretty confident that we would get there. And we weren't being too threatened by what was going on behind us. So we had sort of a bit of a buffer day. So this is the very first day of bumps. So I'm going to just start to reshare my screen. And we'll listen to that first 90 seconds. And then what we're going to do is then just jump to the very end when we do make that bump. We didn't actually call any power 10s or anything. We didn't really need it. We bumped, for the Oxford people listening, about halfway along the green banks, which is probably 2/5 of the way in if you're starting on the top bung line. And then you can also hear how my voice changes and everything changes when I need them to clear really safely. So we will jump in and listen to this, and hopefully this works all okay. Let me jump in here. Okay. And I have to now sit through the cringe of listening to myself listen, and while you're all listening to it too.
Again, Nadia.
12. It's me counting down. Tiny one from 2. 5. Squat. 3/4. Half. Half. 3/4. 3/4. 3/4. Full. Full. Yeah. Good. Legs on, Pembroke. Legs on. Good. Another 5 on the legs. Clean at the back. Clean. That's the leg. Clean. Clean. Your rhythm. Really nice. We're going to stride. Ready. This one now. Long. 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 Yeah, moving really well. Moving really nicely. Good. You're holding a leg. Don't make any silly mistakes. We're just going to be really chill, really relaxed. Up top, clean. Ready? Now. Clean up top. Second stride. This one. Go. Relax. Relax. Yeah, good. That's your rhythm. Good change. Really good. Really nice. Moving. Okay, you are the faster crew. We are going to make a bump today, but we're going to do it in our rhythm. Yep. Big long legs. Ready. Middle 4. Long legs. No. Long legs. Okay. That's so cringy listening to that with you all looking at me. But one thing actually that you might have clocked at the beginning was they were not square at the front. So make sure they're square by a couple of seconds to go. I was very busy counting down, and one of the girls went, "Should we square?" So make sure that's a top tip for me, is make sure we're square when we start racing. But it was a big thing. We didn't plan to have a second stride, but I called a second stride because the adrenaline was high, the rate was quite high, and we just needed to bring it back down again. I could see that we were moving really well. The speeds were coming, you know, we've got a length already. And so I was pretty confident to say, look, we're going to get a bump, but you just need to stay in your rhythm. So that was a big thing. And throughout essentially the next couple of minutes, it's very much similar. I'm going to put the whole thing online so you can listen to it in the next week or so. So then just lastly, I'm just going to show you then how we finish that off and we make the bump, and then just listen to how we clear as well.
Hill. Yeah, good. You're moving really nicely. Keep driving uphill for me. Keep pushing. You've got that length. You've got the press. You are going to make this bump. They are not going to get away from you. Clean. Ready. Balfour. Step it up, work. Let's go. Hands move, Balfour. Hands move. Hands move. You are so close to this bump. Keep moving. Keep the hands moving. Yeah. Hands move. Hands move. Yeah, good. Press up. Go. Press. 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 Okay, they've conceded. We're going to paddle. Light, 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 light. Good, good. Really light. Really relaxed. Really clean. We're going to come out. Really relaxed. Really clean. Really relaxed. Good. I'm going to clear this line all the way into the bank. Clear. One more. Easy there. There you go, girl.
So you can hear there just, you know, tonally, I'm a lot more aggressive. I'm pushing them a lot harder. I'm talking a lot to Balfour because I can see just the dirty water they were rowing in. So they just needed to be clean. They were kind of shortening up quite a lot, which is why I was like, okay, let's keep going, Balfour. No big pushes, nothing kind of drama. And then you could hear the whistles going as well. And then as soon as we're okay, light, 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 and we just pulled out of the way. So it's one of those ones where it's super hard to practice, but actually just the more that you can kind of just preempt some of those challenges that you might face, the more that you'll feel prepared when you're kind of going into bumps in the next couple of weeks. We will open the floor to questions, but I'm going to just give it a couple of minutes. But equally, if you don't get the chance to ask now, or you're watching this belatedly, just drop us a message on Instagram. And also, we do all of our webinars and things for free because we want to try and build more of a Coxing community, and we want to get more people loving our amazing sport and sitting in that fantastic seat that we occupy. So if you are able to, and you could click that QR code and buy us a coffee, it helps us to basically pay for our Zoom accounts. And to be honest, that's pretty much it. We're doing this because we love our sport and we want to just basically keep providing it. And if you've never heard of WOX before, please go and follow us online. We do lots of different webinars. There's also a great back catalogue on YouTube, which we'll put in the link when we send out this recording as well. All the things from multi-lane racing, if you're looking at racing Henley this year and doing qualifiers, all those sorts of things. There's loads that you can learn from: steering, race calls, being technical, race recordings, all those sorts of things, all free to access. So please do follow us and get stuck into the community, and we'll be around Henley Women's and Henley Royal in person as well. So do come say hi, and we've got loads of cool stickers you can just put all over your boathouse as well.
And I think Zoe is firing a cannon, possibly. Yeah. So
yeah, if you hear that cannon, that's probably another one of our WOX mentors as well. Anything to wrap up from you guys if we don't have any questions?
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. Enjoy it, especially if it's your first time. Don't be stressed. It's really fun.
Yeah, it is super fun.
Completely agree. Like, some of the best bumps I've had aren't the ones where, like, I've never got blades. I've been bumped, I've bumped other people, but like the best ones are just when you go in and have a great time. And yeah, just enjoy every moment, no matter the result. Really, getting bumped is not the end of the world, but really making friends as a crew is the best part of it all.
Yeah, totally. Completely agree. I don't think I can sum it up any better. Thank you everybody for joining. And yeah, we hope to see you at a WOX event soon.